Microsoft admits to mistakes, Facebook says they're fixing it, and how startups can be the change they want to see in the world. Tech News Tonight is next.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Tonight, episode 446 for Thursday, October 15th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by Blue Apron. Blue Apron will send you all of the ingredients to cook fresh, delicious meals with simple step-by-step instructions right to your front door. See what's on the menu this week and get your first 2 meals free by going to blueapron.com/twit. That's blueapron.com/twit. Welcome. I am Megan Morrone. After the break, we'll talk to John Battelle, founder of Wired and the Industry Standard. But first, let's get to the tech news. Attorney General of California Kamala Harris has announced a new way for victims to combat cyber exploitation, also known as revenge porn. That's the all too common practice of uploading and sharing explicit images or videos in order to shame or extort someone, often an ex. BuzzFeed says the new program was created with the help of a task force comprised of victims advocates, academics, law enforcement, and representatives from Twitter, Facebook, Google, and Yahoo, also other leading internet companies. There's a new website at oag.ca.gov/cyber exploitation with tools for fighting back. Yahoo has an updated mail app that has a plethora of new features, including a possible solution to the headache of passwords. Yahoo account key uses push notifications, not passwords, to verify your identity. Harry McCracken over at Fast Company has had some time to test the revamped mail app. He says it's slicker, speedier, and smarter, especially when it comes to search. The new Yahoo Mail is available now on Android and iOS. Now, Peter Bright at Ars Technica writes that Microsoft has admitted to automatically upgrading some Windows 7 and Windows 8 users to Windows 10. Now, the company has been doing its best to encourage people to update to the newest OS with alerts and by making Windows 10 free, but some users still aren't interested. Windows 10 appears as an optional update in the Windows Update control panel, but recently someone somewhere decided that it should be checked by default. For the record, optional updates are not supposed to be checked by default. In a statement to Ars Technica, Microsoft said this was a mistake, and going forward, they will be removing the default check. Now, although Facebook opens you up to a world of cute dog photos and a seemingly endless stream of precious engagement photos right there on your iPhone, it also drains your battery even when you're not using it, and even when you have background app refresh turned off. Some iPhone users report that Facebook represents 15% of the phone's total battery drain. Now, it's unclear why Facebook is doing this on the iOS app, but Mac Stories' Federico Vitici mused that it could be due to the fact that Facebook auto-plays videos on Wi-Fi or cellular. The app might be draining your battery with the effort of keeping silent audio in the background whenever a video plays in the app. Now, after several reports from users, Facebook has confirmed that it is working on a fix. Coming up, we will chat with the founder of Wired about how startups can be a force for change. But first, this episode of Tech News Tonight is brought to you by Blue Apron, a company that makes cooking delicious meals easy by delivering fresh, ready-to-cook meals right to your door. For less than $10 per meal, Blue Apron sends you fresh ingredients, perfectly proportioned with step-by-step recipe instructions, including beautifully printed pictures. That means no trips to the grocery store and no waste from unused ingredients. Each balanced meal is 500 to 700 calories per serving. Cooking takes half an hour. Shipping is free. And the menus are always new. They won't send the same meal twice. They work around your schedule and dietary preferences, and Blue Apron's experts source only the best seasonal ingredients for incredible meals like one-pot shrimp perlou or mixed mushroom risotto with porcini broth, leek, and chives. Check out this week's menu and get your first 2 meals free by going to blueapron.com/twit. That's right, 2 free meals just for going to blueapron.com/twit. And we thank Blue Apron for their support of Tech News Tonight. Earlier, I had a chance to interview John Battelle from NewCo. Here's that interview. Last night on the show, we talked to a reporter from the New York Times about Silicon Valley's tech bro sensibility and the failure of one startup whose mission was essentially to gentrify the San Francisco bus system. Our guest tonight is the man behind a company devoted to finding and helping startups with more positive missions, and he's doing it through festivals. You might know John Battelle as the founder of the Industry Standard or the co-founding editor of Wired. He was also a pioneer in blog advertising and the founder of Federated Media. In 2012, Battelle started a venture called NewCo, and he's here today to talk to us about it. Welcome, John.
Thank you for having me.
So explain what NewCo is and why you started it.
Well, it started really as a passion project. At the end of 2011, I kind of woke up after doing I think it was my 8th Web2 Summit, which is your classic, gather 1,500 people in a big hotel ballroom and parade, 60 or 70 speakers in front of them over the course of 2.5 days. And I just woke up and couldn't do it anymore. And I didn't know why at the time. I just knew that I didn't have a heart for it. And I think part of it had to do with the proliferation of all the tech media that had happened in the 8 years since Tim O'Reilly and I started that conference. Part of it also was just a general malaise around the whole model of how we were presenting founders and interesting companies. It struck me that it was starting to move in a direction that felt a bit too laudatory. And it was almost moving into a sensibility that the whole story was about this one person on stage, as opposed to the company and the mission of that company and what the company was, what kind of change that company was trying to affect. And it was hard to deliver the idea and the true feeling of what happens inside of a company by taking one person out of it and sticking them on stage. I found that in my work over the years, the best way to understand a company and truly get a sense of its core narrative and the change that they were trying to affect was to go inside the offices, see what's on the walls, meet the founders, get a tour maybe, get a demo maybe, see what's on the walls and see who's in the building. And so my co-founders and I came up with this idea of turning the conference model inside out. And instead of putting all the attendees in one place and then putting, speakers in front of them, which was obviously very good for the speakers, but not necessarily a great experience for the audience in terms of learning and gathering information and connecting. We redistribute the attendees around a given city, and the companies open their doors. And you choose your schedule through the day, which companies you want to see, between 10 to 20 companies every hour. And it has an intentionality, which is really interesting because it creates almost a flash social network when people are all in one place at one time because they want to meet the founders of alt school. They all share a passion or an interest in the new alt school model. And that creates a really interesting group and set of connections there, not just for the attendees, but also for the people who are presenting inside their own offices at alt school. They have 40 or 50 or 60 people sitting in front of them who have all raised their hand and gotten out of their offices and into the headquarters of alt school to meet the founders. So it seemed to me a much richer idea. And we piloted it in 2012 in one market here in San Francisco. And now we have 15 or more markets around the world that are doing this model.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think it's so important to get people out. We're so into social media. We think we're connecting with people when we're not really. I mean, looking people face to face is so important. The other thing, it seems like you're really trying to create and find companies with a positive mission.
Yes.
They want to make positive change in the world. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. I've never done a media product that doesn't have a strong framework and an editorial point of view. And everything I've ever done sort of follows I would say, a long-standing narrative that has to do with the impact of technology as it intersects with culture. And it struck me that in the past few years, there's really been a shift in new company creation. The ones that are growing the fastest, the ones that seem to have the greatest impact, whether that's a small impact in a small market or a big impact in a big market, the companies all shared a common set of characteristics. And at the core of it was that they were all mission driven. And of course, any company can write a mission and have a mission, but not every company is on a mission. And so I started noticing the most interesting companies to me personally were those that were really on a mission. And when you took that apart, you saw that they were on a mission to affect some kind of positive change, either in the market that they're in, or in the way they express themselves as a business, or both. So how do they treat their workers? How do they create the space where people work? What kind of policies do they have? What kind of change are they trying to make in their market? It almost always starts with the ability to answer a very simple question, which is, wouldn't it be cool if ... right? And so, like, wouldn't it be cool if when you traveled abroad, you could stay in native people's homes and get the point of view of someone who actually lives in that area, and that becomes Airbnb or HomeAway. Or wouldn't it be cool if we completely rethought how schools work and tailored individual education to the student, as opposed to forcing them into a K through 12 death march? And that's alt school, right? And as with anything, to sort of name it and say, hey, it seems like there's a lot of these companies, all of a sudden they're everywhere. And so our mission is to identify all of those companies and to celebrate them with our festivals, and then later with the media that we're planning to roll out, and then to connect them to each other.
That's really interesting. Alt school is one I'm really inspired by it. I have school-age kids, so it's really interesting.
Yeah,
and
me too.
And I don't think of it as the same way I think about something like Uber. A lot of the startups that are just these crazy founders that are going to make it happen. It's like alt school. It seems like more of an idea, and it's really interesting. So, in what ways did your early experiences? We talked about that you were at Wired. You were a co-founding editor at Wired. You were at the Industry Standard, founded the Industry Standard. In what ways did those early experiences get you to where you are now?
I think the key is that in both of those cases, and also at Federated, the companies themselves were what we now call newcos. They were on a mission to effect some significant change. In Wired's case, we really believed that the story of how digital technology was going to change culture was huge, and that the way it was now wasn't good enough. There wasn't good enough coverage. There wasn't a community of people who were rallied around a way of telling that story, and that's why we launched the publication. And with the Standard, the same thing. We felt like the journalism around covering the internet was very, very surface. It didn't have a deep appreciation and understanding of the true meaning and shift that the internet augured for business in general. And I think this idea that there's a big story happening, and you can kind of see it everywhere, but there isn't a convening sort of campfire around that story, and a convening set of shared values that bring a community together. We felt like that didn't exist, and that we want to bring Newco to be the brand that means this new kind of company that is imagining a different way of doing what we consider capitalism. Because the last 50 years we built a capitalistic infrastructure, which, while it has many, many benefits and created lots of jobs and created the consumer culture that now is dominant, I think there's a very deep sense amongst most thinking people that economic engine is not sustainable, and that it's up to us to figure out a new engine. What does it look like? And you can't just top down that and say, well, we're going to, field marshal a new kind of capitalism. It has to come from the bottom up. And for us, that means identifying all these new kinds of companies and saying, this is an interesting new way of doing it, and it has positive impact, and it looks at the world a little differently, and let's get inside that company and understand it so we can accelerate the shift from an old way of doing things to a better way of doing things.
So now you were both part of and a major chronicler of the .com era. Then you moved into Federated Media. That was a whole new era with blogs and what that meant. And then you went on to found and co-host the popular Web 2.0 Summit. Where are we now? Are we in 3.0, or what defines this era?
I think what defines it is that people are rethinking or maybe even renegotiating their social contract with work. When I came into the workforce almost 3 decades ago, the contract with work was you get a job so you can make a living, right? And you may not like your job, and you probably don't like your job, but it's so that you can have a living and raise a family and do the things outside of work that matter in life. I think what we're moving towards is people seeing purpose in their work that integrates with purpose in their life. And this idea of integrating the two is a really new and important concept that we have to get right. But, you know, there's this old adage, it's a European adage of, you know, the way life works is there's 8 hours of sleep, there's 8 hours of work, and there's 8 hours of what you will. But I think in the world of startups in particular, that 8 hours of what you will is just 8 more hours of work. So how do you take the waking hours and live a fully expressed life that includes work, but also honors, you know, the other things in your life? And that's the renegotiation of the social contract that I think is happening right now.
Well, how can founders or how can people get involved with NewCo, get their companies involved?
Well, the best way to get involved is to become a host company. There's no charge to do so. There's an application process, and it's like being invited to speak at an event. There is an editorial vetting process, and we make sure that the company has a NewCo narrative in the core of it. And then it's very simple. Once that happens, you go up on our platform, and when the festival in that particular city, wherever you happen to be, rolls around, you open your doors, and we take care of making sure the right people end up in the office. And so far, the results have been overwhelmingly positive in terms of the values that are received by both the host companies as well as the attendees who go.
Well, John Battelle, thank you so much for joining us. John is the co-founder and CEO of NewCo. You can find out more at newco.co, and he's also at John Battelle on Twitter. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Well, thanks to John Battelle for the interview, and obviously we did it in the other studio. Thank you to Anthony and Jason and Burke and Alex for getting us all set up and back in this studio. And thanks to Captain Kipper on the Tech News Today subreddit for posting an article from The Stack about how German police are warning parents to stop posting pictures of their children on Facebook. Police say that not only will your child find the photos embarrassing later, they could also be used by bullies or worse. Now, police made the plea in a Facebook post that has since been viewed by over 7 million people. What do you think? Should parents stop using their cute kid pics as Facebook fodder? Now, I always ask permission of my kids before posting their photo, but I understand babies are not so good at giving consent. Let me know what you think on Facebook, Twitter, or by emailing me at megan@twit.tv. And thanks to John Little, who commented on this story when I posted it earlier this afternoon. John writes, "No, if you are going to live your life and fear that someone may misuse a photo, then it is time for you to bubble wrap your child and store him or her in your basement." Thank you, John. That is it for this edition of Tech News Tonight. You can subscribe to the show at twit.tv/TN2. You can write to us at TN2@twit.tv and watch live every weekday at 4 p.m. Pacific. And don't miss our morning news program, Tech News Today, every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I am Megan Morrone. Thanks for watching.
Bandwidth for Tech News Tonight is brought to you by CashFly.com.